got a thing for punishment?
Cassie wins.
Hello fellow randoms, welcome to my first review, Mortal Kombat 10, better known as Mortal Kombat X, the 10th installment in the series and second MK game created by NetherRealm Studios. Does it live up to the hype? Or does it fall flat in the shadow of its predecessor? Let's find out. As many gamers who love fighting games already know that a story in a fighting game don't normally mix, it's either crap or total crap. However, since NetherRealm Studios was formed back in 2010 and released their first game, which was Mortal Kombat, it proved that finally the fighting game genre can have decent stories. They weave the story into gameplay so masterfully, it is admirable to say the least. They continue the if it ain't broke don't fix it method onto Injustice Gods Among Us, and now they've done it again with Mortal Kombat X. Although it is a cliched good versus evil tale, it will keep you interested nonetheless, as well as you are getting to grips with the controls. It reminds me of an 80s martial arts action flick, entertaining but hilariously painful at times. You see choreographed type scenes between a mere human and someone who could have fried their opponent in less than a second go fisticuffs with them. It just doesn't make sense. But if you take it with a grain of salt, you'll understand that it's trying to go for the action flick side. Again, painfully hilarious. The story is nothing you haven't seen before, but it manages to get you invested into the characters enough to care and see the story play out. More so than any other fighting game, even more than my favorite fighting game, Street Fighter. Throwing a large roster at you, putting you into the shoes of each of these characters for 3 to 4 matches at a time. Surprisingly, NetherRealms gave up 8 character slots for a new generation of characters to take the spot. Old characters return, old rivalries continue,
This is the end of you.
a new generation of fighters emerged due to the story covering 25 years after the events of Mortal Kombat 9, but it is told in a non-linear fashion. Unfortunately, the story is highly forgettable with a nice twist in the post-credits scene, which I will not spoil for you, and I'm sure the fans would appreciate the new direction the studio plans to take in the future. It may be a violent soap opera, it may not be an elaborate story as its predecessor, it may have terrible cliched one-liners and a bad attempt at romance, but it still lives up to Mortal Kombat 9's reputation. Quan Chi gets his ass handed to him every single time by every single person in the game. It's pretty funny. The visual aesthetic of Mortal Kombat X is beautiful, surprisingly a cross-generational game that actually qualifies for next gen. No, sadly it is not the Unreal 4 engine, it is the Unreal 3 engine but tweaked to their liking to create the beautiful 1080p 60 frames per second IP. It is strikingly eye-catching. You can see the player's face get bloodied and bruised according to the damage done to their health bar. You can even see the sweat from their pores. The animations are smooth and crisp, gory and bloody visuals true to its nature that can sometimes make you close half your eyes as you see the brutal finishes accompanied with the crackling sound design. Making a return are the interactive backgrounds from Injustice Gods Among Us. They are dynamic and have their own animations, which is beautiful to see, and with plenty of damage doing objects on the level. Gamers will certainly appreciate this little nuance. The X-rays make a dramatic return this time around, and are more cinematic, making you cringe at its over-the-top brutalness. My only gripe with the stages is that they differ so much from the actual scene that you are in, and I'm only talking about correlation with the story mode. For example, I don't want to spoil anything. You'll be at an enemy's camp, and you can see there's a bunch of tents around in the jungle. And as soon as the fight is about to begin, instead of being surrounded by tents in the jungle, you are behind the tents, and you can see the whole jungle. It just doesn't make sense. according to the story mode. Other than that, it's fine. You suddenly end up in a different place from the setting that you were in. On top of that, there is the annoying letterbox that comes after a cutscene and at the beginning of your match. It doesn't blend well with its immersive feel. While we're talking about annoyingness, NetherRealm still haven't sorted out the stupid fall down animations. People who have played the previous Mortal Kombat and who have played Injustice Gods Among Us understand my pain. Although this is just a minor issue, this is just me nitpicking now. The character models look great, although it's a little here and there. New characters such as Devora look incredibly detailed with high-res textures from a black hexagon-shaped eyes with the physics of a cape. This sort of detail and complexity doesn't seem to have been applied to the rest of the characters. For example, Sonya Blade, who looks too bland and simple, although it probably makes sense because of her militaristic background, but still, she didn't strike as an appealing character to me, visually. Due to the 1080p resolution, the game looks much more beautiful and cinematic. This adds to the value of the game. There's not much to say about the sound, only that it is awesome. Every bone crack, punch, groin kick, weapon smash and glass shatter is rich, intense and immerses you more into its world. The voice acting is adequate enough and better than most fighting games out there. Although the music is another issue, for me that was a hit or miss. It's like the previous Mortal Kombat game. The music just wouldn't blend well in with the ambiance of the game. But knowing this, NetherRealm Studios was smart enough to include several settings in the options menu. You can change the sliders of the ambiance, the cinematic volume, the dialogue, the music and the sound effects. So you can change it to whatever suits you best. It's great to see the older characters' relationship evolved and be taken to a new level. This I definitely appreciate. Oh, and is it just me or does Kano look and sound exactly like Deathstroke?
Then all's well. Piss me off. And Cassie's gonna meet Uncle Kano.
Finally, it is good to see a game where its quick time events make sense and add to the gameplay. Nothing like the Order 1886 bullshit. Even though they are deserving, they quickly over time get tedious and feel dragged on. The biggest addition to the gameplay mechanics in Mortal Kombat X is variations, which adds to the level of depth to the game. For each character you have 3 different variations, with one essentially being the safest bet out of the 3 and the other 2 being more dangerous and risky in terms of playstyles. For some characters, variations really changes the way they play and it will take time to get used to these new movesets. The best example is Kitana, with one of her variations being named Mournful. It suddenly makes her feel like Jade from the previous Mortal Kombat. Her movesets drastically change. The touch I love the most is that whomever you play as, the characters will know who they're up against. And I'm not just talking about the story. Talking about online, single match, 1v1, Tower of the Hill, any sort of mode you're talking about. Every player knows who they're up against. This little touch makes it feel much more believable and meaningful. It all has context. Now I know what you're thinking. You may say, what if it's the same characters on both sides? Well, they react to that as well, calling the doppelganger an illusion, etc, etc. It's just really cool to see that, in my opinion.
You do not beguile me. My reflection speaks, and combats you as well.
The characters have more weight to them in comparison to the previous games. The age characters feel a little sluggish at first, but this is probably due to having more smoother and realistic animations. They're just a little slower. For example, the character I would use is Jax. His attacks are much more powerful and he's just much more slower overall. The newer generation of fighters have a great sense of speed to their movements and attacks if combos are strung together correctly, although all of this will take some time to get used to for newcomers. Overall, the frame rate holds at a steady 60 frames per second even at hectic moments. The only issue I had was during the quick time events, the frame rate would jitter a little. This was not the slow motion, it felt like it dropped a few frame rates, although it could just be me. Also, the fighting game elites will be happy to know that the game includes frame rate data and damage data for each moveset, certainly a plus point for the evil competitors alike. Similar to Mortal Kombat 9, to amplify the game's longevity, there are certain challenge modes. The first being the Living Towers. This time there are 3 towers. Each tower has different lengths, and each of the towers update at different intervals, giving you types of challenges each hour, each day, and each week. Your normal quick tower, which updates every hour. The daily tower, it is in the name, is daily. and the third tower is your Premier Tower, which updates every week. My experience was limited as I was reviewing the game before release and the servers were not working properly, which caused problems for me on multiplayer, faction wars and living towers. Since it's been released now, the servers still have a bit of problem with them. The new mode, or should I say metagame, is a faction war. As soon as the game starts and you try to enter multiplayer, it asks you to choose one of the 5 factions available to you. The 5 factions being Lin Kuei, which is Sub-Zeros, White Lotus, which is Raiden's, Brother of Shadow, which is Quan Chi's, Special Forces, which is Cassie Cage's, or you could just say the Cage family. And last faction is Black Dragon, which is Kano's, or you could just say Mercenaries. However, this metagame is not meaningful enough because you can't see how much of a difference you make with your points, which can be gathered from every mode, except for the crypt of course. All you see is you barely making a difference to a large XP bar. It is a good idea to add to the replay value of the game, but sadly its execution was not great. Test Your Luck is a mode which applies different modifiers to each match. While this is fun, it seems really gimmicky. I would advise to play this more now and then, not too much of this because it will dumb down your experience. The crypt has significantly improved. It now feels like a first-person adventure minigame, exploring your way through the massive crypt, unlocking fatalities, brutalities, concept art, and more in an innovative way. Be prepared for some jump scare quick-time events. But once you complete it, you are rewarded with coins. While exploring the crypt, you gain certain items in your inventory that help you maneuver around the map, such as Raiden's staff used as a sort of teleporter. The lore is deep and you get a sense of that in the journal and the collections page which come up when you are in the crypt. Multiplayer has a few different modes. There is your standard lobbies, then your versus battles, your team battles, King of the Hill, and finally the tower battle. The netcode was not also terrible, but it wasn't great either. The only issue is I was reviewing the game before release. The online component overall is stable, but you will notice lag when you input combos. Be prepared to get your ass handed to you over and over again online. Hands down the best Mortal Kombat to date, with its few shortcomings that do not hurt your experience at all. It has more than made up for it with its brutal finishes, superbly fun gameplay, entertaining story and all the content that comes in this sweet little package. I give it a 9 out of 10, a must-own fighting game for this generation of consoles. You will not be disappointed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and what you think of this game if you've bought it. Until next time, randoms, peace. So I'm always in the
25.
box. I'm out there! That mistake you made was like 102. I'm sorry.
Oh snap! Oh snap!
That was a mistake in the half.
No, look, the keeper was so off, and me, I'm looking. What? The? Look! Bang!